Yeah, I think.
All right. Hi, everyone. How's it going? Today, we are finally going to get down to our Core 2.0 discussion. This is going to be live, unlike the usual. So, this is going to be quite a change in pace. Today, I will have three guests who will be coming on for a dialogue with me. First, we have Euro's top four placer, Tristan Von Doggo. Hi, Tris.
Hey Ben, how's it going?
Doing well. And well, hopefully this hasn't caught you too off guard. Core 2.0, man, that's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm conflicted over it, but I think we can get into that when we start discussing.
Indeed. Yep. Joining me as well is another Euro top card contender. It's Richard, better known as Highwire. Hi, Rich.
Hi, Ben. Thanks for having me on. I am very excited by this, perhaps not for competitive reasons,
Yeah, and
but for kind of health of the game reasons.
yeah, and speaking of tournaments, you are going to be organizing an Only Connect Runner tomorrow. Is that right?
Yep. So tomorrow night, if you are going to be at UK Nationals and you're looking for something to do in the early evening, come to the event space for about 6:15. There will be a quiz. All the proceeds from the quiz are going to go to a charity of the winning team's choice. It'll start at 7. It'll be a lot of fun. If you don't have a team, just turn up and register, and I will dump you all into exciting teams of 3. It'll be a great way to get to know new people and kind of start the weekend off before we all end up hating each other on Saturday.
Yeah, I can vouch that Netrunner related quizzing is very good fun. Go for it. And finally, as our final guest, but certainly not least, we have Yakuza.
Hi, Ben.
Owen. Hello. And yeah, first time met you at Euros, and I'm glad to have you on here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for joining. I feel a bit underpowered. I'm probably the least competitive of the players over here. I consider myself mostly a TO, but I'm glad to join you guys.
And that's exactly why I invited you on, to have a different perspective on all this Core 2 nonsense. So let's get into this Core 2 shenanigans. So Core 2 has apparently been in the makings for a while, and well, we can only speculate as to why Core 2 was printed and released. Do you all think it's a good move for the metagame's health? And do you think it's a good move for attracting new players? Those are the two big questions I have. Why not we start with Yakuza? Since, you do some TOing, you like to introduce new players to the game. What do you think of a new core set?
I'm pretty happy that you split the question in two parts, because I'm not entirely convinced on what this will do for the competitive metagame, but I'm really happy what this will do for the health of the game in the eyes of new players, and how it will attract more new players, and how it will take certain problem cards in the eyes of more, let's say, casually minded players away. Actually, I'm pretty happy with it. I'm not entirely certain how this will shake out for the more competitive side of things, but let's see how it works out. I'm pretty happy, personally.
Yeah, it seems like the game has been stagnating for a while and it needed something new, and this is the something new. Yep.
I had a weird experience when the spoilers went up. So I was out of the house and playing Arkham, and I literally just died really early in the scenario, and I was just sat there, and I picked my phone up, and it lit up with notifications because it was just after the Core 2 announcement, and within about 10 minutes, I had probably 5 or 6 players from the Sheffield meta who had lapsed, who maybe hadn't been to tournaments before, all messaging me going, have you seen this announcement? I'm really excited. Is there going to be a tournament? I had a guy who hasn't played for a year say to me, hey, I've still got a core set in the first 2 cycles. I think I've realized I've got nearly like 3 of a Core 2.0 now. Are we going to do a Core 2.0 only tournament? So I think it's been very good. I mean, I don't know how good it's going to be for attracting new players, because I think Netrunner has a difficulty curve issue, and I think people can find it intimidating. But I think the people it is going to bring back are the people who loved it, fell out of love with it when the competitive meta drove in directions that they found frustrating, and this feels like a new lease on life for the game for them. And I think it's going to see certainly local tournament attendance go up in the short term.
Yeah,
I'll agree.
Yeah,
I haven't done any active outreach yet, and I've already had 4 lapsed players react as well. So same thing over here. Agreed.
Indeed, I'm quite surprised, because I've actually heard of people that are coming back into the game or wanting to pick up this game because of this, even though I didn't think it would resolve the issue of the high buy-in, since it's not a complete reboot like Game of Thrones. Tris, what do you think?
Well, so I'm really happy to hear the reports from both Yakuza and Rich saying that people are coming back in. Because one of the things that I heard today was I was listening to the latest Shut Up and Sit Down podcast, where, if people don't know, one of the editors of that site, Quinton Smith, used to be a massive Netrunner player and used to be all over the UK scene. He was discussing with Paul on the podcast and saying that his experience has been from players that lapsed around about the same time that he did, that their response was, this is really cool, but it's not enough to bring us back into the game. They sort of seem to be waiting for an entire reboot of the game, a la the Game of Thrones 2.0. So it's exciting to see that their experience is in the minority compared to what's happening, where we've got tons of players that are now excited to come back into the game. And certainly up here in Oxford, I know of at least one player that lapsed and is coming back, and we'll see what happens. Obviously, our meta's a little bit more offline than some of these bigger ones, but we'll see what attendance looks like next week, Monday.
Yep, indeed. All right. Without further ado, let's get into the cards. Today we'll be discussing only the Corp side cards. Hopefully we can cover all of them. I think we'll be rambling on a lot of them for some time. To the audience who's watching this right now, This is meant to be a live discussion and dialogue, as live as a living card game. So if y'all have any inputs at all, or anything y'all want to bring up, drop them in the chat, and I might, if there's time, I might actually bring them up, on your behalf. So do join the discussion as well. We'll get into it with our first faction, Haas-Bioroid. So we are gonna look at 3 different categories of cards. We'll start with the victory cards like agendas and win conditions and so on. For the HB side, we find that the core ABT has been replaced by Vitruvius. So 2 big things. Firstly, we actually get to keep Project Vitruvius, which I think is an interesting agenda. And secondly, HB, the number of 3/2s in HB has been reduced from 6 to 3, but they still do keep the Baltic labor as well. Anyone comment on that?
I will happily jump in here because this is my favorite faction, and this is the faction where I've experienced both the biggest loss and the biggest excitement in terms of what they've added to the card pool. So we can't discuss HB without discussing the loss of Engineering the Future and its replacement with Stronger Together, because that for me is the defining change to the faction, given that ETF has been overwhelmingly the dominant ID at top tier tournament play for anyone that's interested in playing Haas-Bioroid. Sure, fine, I get it. You see a little bit of CI, but I think if the rumors are correct about the loss of accelerated diagnostics, I think that ID diminishes substantially in power level. So,
diagnostics is rotating out. Yes,
it's definitely gone. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. In terms of new most wanted list, that's also being rumored.
Ultimately, Tris, whether it goes onto a new MWL is going to be irrelevant. Like, we have less than 6 weeks, 8 weeks of this meta before rotation kicks in for sure at Worlds in November. So I think that even if CI doesn't see accelerated diagnostic going on to the most wanted list, that's not going to be an issue for very long.
Sure, that's fair. I think the point being that we have a single alternative ID, or at least had a single alternative ID in Haas-Bioroid as a faction. And losing ETF is massively going to shake up what kinds of HB decks that we're going to see. This is really sad for me because I love ETF as one of my favorite IDs. I think what made it such an exciting ID for me personally, and I think why a lot of competitive players gravitated towards it, is because of its versatility. I don't believe in the argument that's made by a lot of people that these kinds of efficiency IDs, your HB ETFs, your Kates, are bad for the game and bad from a design perspective because they give you rewards for doing things that you'd ordinarily do in the game. I don't buy that at all. I think it's important to have economy IDs like HB that reward you for doing the kinds of things that you normally do in the game, but in different ways. It's exciting to me that we had both food coats and now Estelle acid spam being 2 viable archetypes out of the same identity, regardless of your opinions of those particular kinds of decks, whether or not you think Estelle is broken and Friends is broken. The fact remains that out of ETF specifically, we got 2 competitively viable archetypes, and that's really exciting.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I would argue, Tris, that what you're looking at in those, like if you look at food coats, you look at moon spam, I think both of those decks are strong enough in terms of the card quality in them that you could reasonably play them out of all the other IDs. The reason they were played out of ETF was purely because it was the most efficient, the best use ID that you could pick. And that's, I mean, I agree with you. I'm not particularly against ETF as an ID, but I think the reason, like the argument that, this is an ID that supports multiple viable decks, is there are multiple viable decks you can build with 49 purple cards, and you would always put ETF on the front of them.
Yeah,
I think that's fair.
The thing is, ETF is too efficient for what it does. Versatility is fine, but I'm for one happy to see ETF go, because this actually opens up the design space for other HB IDs. In particular, if they want to make a new econ-based ID in the future, something that perhaps only rewards you for installing ice, that would be a lot more balanced in my opinion, and would actually be a consideration during deck building. It's not, oh, okay, I'll start with ETF and I'll put 49 cards in. It's, do I want to play this, or do I want to play, say, Architects of Tomorrow, say, Seder Labs? So I think from the deck building perspective, I much prefer that ETF rotates and maybe we get something else.
But Ben, I think that your point says a lot. The problem with HB's ID pool doesn't seem to me to be there exists one overwhelmingly dominantly powerful ID that renders all the others unplayable. It's that compared to most of the other good IDs in the game, and I'm talking across all factions, most of the HB IDs aren't really that good or that exciting. I mean, the fact that we're talking about the need to print a new kind of HB ID speaks volumes, in my opinion.
I don't think so. I think Seder is actually a very interesting ID. It's just that competitive players haven't really got a chance to play with it because ETF is just too good.
Yeah, and I think Architects of Thought might also get some play, because I think when it was first printed, people thought, actually, there's a decent amount of economy in a 4 credit saving per Bioroid, but it was just it was hated out by the pure efficiency of ETF, which didn't require you to build around it quite in the same way that Architects does.
Yeah. Well, so I guess we'll leave ETF there to discuss a bit later. Another victory card we are actually quite excited to see, at least I am, is Ash, which has been
I'm delighted about this.
Yeah, brought back from the dead, and is now actually in a proper core set. So, Yakuza, since you do like to play your onesies and cash refresh, what do you think of Ash coming into the cash refresh card pool?
Actually, I'm very happy that they saved Ash from rotation. Having Ash available in cash refresh, having Ash available in onesies is actually a major boon, because defensive upgrades were quite hard to come by in cash refresh. You could get them in onesies, but you'd have to select the pack. Actually, I find it funny that you mentioned onesies, because to me, actually, the format has done what it needed to do. So to me, it's mostly cycled out. No, I'm happy to see Ash, but I don't have many notes on the HB part. You'd have to see my Weyland and Jinteki notes on the core.
Gotcha. I'll call you when the time comes. Yeah, Tris, you're excited for Ash?
I'm delighted. So I was saying before the show started that one of the things that worried me before the announcement of this new court set has been that it seemed like a lot of the defensive upgrades that we were getting were kind of weak, kind of not really in a position to help Corp score out of a remote. And that, to me, was the scariest thing going into rotation. Because asset spam exists as an archetype, not just because assets are strong, but because the alternative, trying to build a big server and playing Glacier, relies on defensive upgrades, and things were a little bit dicey on that side. I'm really excited to see that they've saved one of the best defensive upgrades, and in my opinion, one of the more healthy ones. I think Caprice is nice and interesting and fun, but ultimately Caprice turns a lot of what could be really interesting games into slightly weighted tosses of a coin. I think Ash is a card that's got way more counterplay on the runner side, and is a card that encourages Corps to think about managing their economy appropriately and creates opportunities for lots of different interactions between runner and Corp. So I'm really, really excited that they kept this card in.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with Tris more. I think Ash should be like the template for what a well-designed defensive upgrade looks like. Like, he's not a guaranteed score, but he makes the runner think, is that an Ash in that remote? Am I going to need enough money to get in there twice or be to trace? It makes you consider your credit pool, your opponent's credit pool, ways of countering that Ash. I think he's a brilliant include in a core set. Like, just in terms of teaching new players the game, I think having Ash available gets people into that mindset where they're thinking about what their opponent's plays could be.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth there. So yeah, it's really good that they have this WinCon in Ash printed for the core set to kind of counterbalance the fact that you no longer can just pure fast advance with HB because you're losing half of your 3-2 agendas. Speaking of 3-2 agendas, shout out to Kayak R17 on chat, who mentioned that they like that they kept the 3-2 over advanced agendas, which I like to call the project agendas. One pattern you actually notice across all the Corp factions is that they actually not only kept all the project agendas, the 3-2s, but they also made them 3-offs in all of the core 2 decks. So that's interesting to note. HB cards that are gonna cycle out. We talked about ABT for a bit. Some people are sad about it. I see that on chat as well.
I am sad about this card. There is nothing there. I mean, they've rendered our "I have no regrets" button, JNet, and that is to me the biggest tragedy. That being said, I think Vitruvius is a great replacement if you're going to pick any 3-2 to stick in the box. Out of any of the factions, Vitruvius is such a well-designed agenda. The kind of thing where you're encouraged to over-advance. I think if you're going to replace ABT, which personally I'm quite sad about, I'm delighted that Vitruvius is the replacement that HB has.
Yep. And I know Encryption Protocol is not a very strong card, and it wasn't really on most people's radars when we talk about rotation, but I think it's important to mention that the critical mass of cards that enable asset spam is going down with Encryption Protocol going out. So I guess one less way that HB can win, which I guess is a good thing given all the asset spam that's floating around right now. Yeah. And AD, as we mentioned, so that's going out as well. CI decks will find it harder to win. Now, econ cards. Again, another pattern you'll see coming up is that all Corp factions will have one econ card. One econ card, and it's a 3-off in the decks. So HB is getting green level. So that's actually saved from rotation. Yes, it was scheduled for rotation. Unfortunately, we're going to lose blue level. So that's going out. One big loss to traditional HB Food Codes Glacier style decks is that we no longer have Eve. Anyone miss that?
How big a loss? I mean, we've got Marilyn as the obvious replacement, right? And
the problem with the reason losing Eve, I think, is a slightly bigger deal than people are thinking about. Is its insane synergy with Breaker Bay Grid. Like Breaker Bay with an Eve was what Food Coats was kind of based around for a long time. Like being able to get those 16 credits for essentially no investment in your scoring remote while you slowly drew into your agendas. That was a very powerful and not very well recognized part of that deck. So Marilyn is a fine replacement, but it doesn't have that kind of 5 cost that you can reduce to next to nothing with Breaker Bay.
See, Rich, I don't know if I agree with the 5 cost being the important thing. For me, it's the trash cost that's the bigger thing.
Sure.
The fact that when you run and you encounter an Eve campaign, you're often highly reluctant, especially if you're not Wizard, to pay that upfront cost. That being said, remember also that we're losing large sources of recursion. We're losing Jackson Howard, so the ability to shuffle Eve back into the deck would have made Food Coats significantly weaker. And I think the fact that you've got that ability printed on Marilyn campaign as a shuffle effect, for me, more than makes up for the 5 cost trash being lowered to 3, I think.
Yeah.
That, for me, I think is way more useful in Food Coats, because I often don't want an Eve sitting there for 8 turns. Typically I'm over-installing his Food Coats after 3 or 4 turns anyway.
Sure.
Yeah, that's very interesting analysis. I think it's a bit of a pity because Eve filled the design space for an interesting econ asset card. One that's high res cost, high trash cost, and, just gives a lot of advantage if you don't contest it. Yep. So those are the econ cards. We'll move on to other cards that you might want to talk about.
One other thing I just quickly want to touch on about green level is I'm quite glad that that's saved, not necessarily for HB, but it's still a great splash in core Weyland because it's a transaction.
Yes.
So I don't know whether that was like part of their consideration, but if you just have a single core 2 set, those 3 green levels go very nicely in your building a better world as well.
Yeah, and if you are building something with a very, limited card pool, something like Cash Refresh, and you're playing Weyland BABW, green level could be a very good splash. So yeah, agree there. Yep. So free for all here. I just want to get the ball rolling by talking about something that the chat has been mentioning. Chris and Quagos from chat talked about Strongbox. Strongbox.
I was about to mention this.
Yes.
This
do the
to
honors.
me
Yep.
is super exciting to include. So in Ash, we've got, as Richard said, the template for defensive upgrades, and I think it's a fantastic card, super well designed. Strongbox to me is a more interesting one. I used to, when I started playing this game and didn't have access to that many cards, Strongbox was the defensive upgrade that I utilized an enormous amount. And I think one of the things that's become clearer about Netrunner recently is that taxing the runner's economy in terms of credits is way more difficult than it used to be. But taxing clicks is still something that HB is uniquely good at as a faction. You know, with cards like load testing, with the ability to force runners to click through their ice in many cases.
Sorry, of all examples to bring up, load testing, really?
You know, I could have gone for O2 shortage, right? Like to gain the click. Yeah.
Okay, carry on.
That being said, what's clear to me in the inclusion of Strongbox is that the designers of this core set, Damon and the rest of the team that put a lot of time and a lot of work into thinking about how this was going to synergize with a larger core set, quite clearly had eyes to some of the other HB IDs. And I'm thinking specifically about Seda here. This is a defensive upgrade that works really, really well with Seda, where the runner doesn't want to spend clicks, doesn't want to lose clicks, because those can be really, really important for helping the Corp to build tempo. And I think having an upgrade like Strongbox that forces you to manage your clicks as the runner is really exciting for the broader HB card pool than just the HB set that we've got in the core set. It's really exciting to see them thinking about things beyond just the core set.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and it also synergizes with an upcoming HB53 agenda that's going to be printed in the next cycle. Spoilers.
Yeah.
All right. Eli 1.0 is rotating. No one, everyone was bracing for that, but yeah, it's still sad.
Why is this not in the core set? Why is Hudson in the core set?
Okay, so this is the point I was going to make. Hudson, out of all of the new cards that they've included, is the one which I cannot understand what it is doing here. It's an ice which has never been played. It's got next to no use in the core set. If you look at it on its own, it's going to be preventing two Maker's Eyes, and that's it. It's going to be the Zaibatsu loyalty of this core set. It's going to sit in everyone's folders and not get used. And that slot could have been used on half a dozen more interesting and not necessarily broken ice.
I would also like to make mention here of the fact that Eli came off the most wanted list specifically because of the existence of Paperclip, equalizing the res to break cost for Corp and Runner. So it's not clear to me that Eli being left out of the card pool because it's too powerful is a sufficient argument here. I think the fact that the design team took Kuroda out of the core set is recognition of the fact that Paperclip is now the standard fractor against which all others are measured. And I think it's really, really sad that they didn't follow from that and decide to include Eli into the core set, especially given that if the rumors about the new MWL are correct and Lady comes off the MWL, most of the factions have really decent ways of breaking Eli for, I think, a reasonable cost. And it would have been a nice ice to include in the core set, where typically your options for cheap ice are kind of underwhelming. Wall of Static, Enigma, they're not interesting options that give the runner the choice between, paying clicks or breaking with a fractor. That's always been, for me, the interesting thing about Eli, is the fact that it gave the runner a little bit of choice.
Yeah, well, interesting that you brought up Kuroda being removed from Core 2.0, because Chris actually brought up a very good point in chat. With no Kuroda in Core 2.0, barrier breakers kind of suck. So Eli 1.0 being in Core 2, actually it will be a nightmare to break.
Yeah, I was about to make the same. As a self-contained thing, if Eli was in there, it would be overwhelmingly powerful in a Core 2 only kind of scenario.
Yeah, but that being said, hopefully we get some good barriers in the HB faction soon to compensate for Eli 1.0. Sada's pretty decent. Eli 2.0 not so much. So hopefully maybe we get Eli 3.0 or something. Yeah, so this will wrap up the HB faction unless any of you have any additional cards to add.
Oh, hang on. There is one thing I'd like to mention. Just in terms of the going back to the Eli point, it's worth pointing out that in Stronger Together, Eli's strength is now 5, which means that Morningstar breaks it really efficiently. I mean, it's disgusting. It's disgusting to install, right? But you know, Morningstar is 5 strings, right?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Good fractor.
Really efficiently, an 8-cost fixed strength breaker.
That is absolutely acceptable to pay.
I mean, to be fair, at least you can't boost the Eli strength. Corporate troubleshooters rotating out, so...
Yes, indeed.
Yes, which I assume they took out of the core set just so they wouldn't have to FAQ it anymore.
I was
Why
thinking
can't
of
we
more...
install MCA on it?
Sorry?
Why can't we install our MCA on it?
Reasons. Yeah, I was thinking more because we already have Helheim servers, which basically does the same thing. But yeah, that's really good as well. So, any other HB cards?
Nope.
All right, we'll move on to Jinteki. Oh my gosh, that's a lot of cards that are in. Let's start with the agendas. So, we have Nisei Mark II, we have Brain Trust. They're both staying. Brain Trust, really? Who plays that? But this actually signals something really interesting. So they are keeping both archetypes in play. So your Glacier style, you know, end the run even after you've gone through all the eyes on the server, after you paid all the tax. Nisei is back. Nisei can enable a Glacier archetype. Brain Trust enabling is a 3-2. Even if blank, it enables fast advance. So your Trick of Light shenanigans and stuff. So yeah, very strong agendas for Jinteki, I think.
Yeah, I think Jinteki's the big winner out of the new core set. I mean, they got so many good cards staying in their card pool. I can't wait to see what people are going to come up with on Jinteki's side. Hopefully it's not going to be a lot of IG floating around, and there'll be some more interesting stuff coming out of Jinteki over the next couple of months.
Yeah, I don't think there's any argument that Jinteki are the big winners in Core 2.0. They've become the default fast advance faction. They've got Trick of Light and Shipment from Tenin available. They've got a passable 3-2 in faction and something which is worth scoring early like a Nisei. They've got access to defensive upgrades and the net damage option. I think they've done incredibly well out of this. Obviously, there's a lot of love for the red faction at FFG HQ.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I'll fully agree.
Box
Jinteki
did say that Jinteki was his favorite faction after all.
Well,
Yeah.
Damon's also loves Trap Jinteki, so it's unsurprising that we see a lot of traps coming in back into the core set.
Yeah, Jinteki is definitely the winner in revised core, in my opinion, as well. There's so many different builds you can go with. The list I've made of possible builds after revised core is ridiculously long. And if you take a look at what rotates out, what they lose from the original core and what they gain from it in the new core, they gain so much. They gain Swordsman, they gain Gift, they gain Ronin. The game would have been so much different if we had lost Ronin in rotation. So I'm really happy that they saved Ronin, for instance. Am I jumping?
No, that's
Oh,
an
yeah.
absolutely key point that you brought up. I was not expecting Ronin to come back, and that is huge because that one card, even though we've been through seven data packs and lots of big boxes and a core set, Ronin still has a very irreplaceable role. No other card can do that much net damage when advanced, except for Philotic.
It's an important card. It's almost unique in what it does. We've seen a new trap-like card in the new cycle coming up, which will function similarly.
But it doesn't do damage. It's different.
I'm not sure. Okay, fair enough. But Ronin still, it forces, it offers a third option for something unknown being advanced in a server. Is it an agenda? I'll just go R&D. Is it a June bug? I'll just go R&D. You know what I'm trying to say.
But Ronin,
it forces having to run on it.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think one thing this game lacks is that aside from, getting to match points, scoring agendas, there are not that many ways to proactively threaten the runner, and Ronin is one of them. So I'm very happy that it's staying. Along with Junebug, of course. This means that your Ronin could be a Junebug, and that's always fun. Yep.
Yeah. The other now, I don't want to kind of jump ahead to next week's discussion, but I think one of the things we have to talk about in terms of victories for Jinteki is actually the disappearance of the econ denial events.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
Traditionally, the way in which you would, as the runner, approach a kind of shell game Jinteki is you would take all their money away and then safely check all of their face downs. With the disappearance of Account Siphon and Vamp, that option has ceased to be an option. So now runners are going to have to start thinking or taking more risks, letting Jinteki get to higher match points before checking face downs and making some gut calls, and they may well lose some games by face planting into double advanced Junebugs.
This to me seems very deliberate on the designer's part. I think a lot of players, certainly I've had experiences before on JNet where people become very, very miserable playing against siphon spam style decks as Jinteki because the game they want to play is to try and force the runner into killing themselves, to score a cheap win that way. And I think this is recognition of the fact that those players want to play a particular way, can't play a particular way because of the existence of particular archetypes. And now, because they're being removed, these kinds of decks do work. I think the way the meta actually responds to this is by including more cards that counter net damage. I expect to see feedback filters making a reappearance in decks. I'm expecting to see criminal decks starting to run Caldera more proactively, and Anarchs just taking it to the face like they always have. Those iPad verses become more important than ever.
Sure, and like even before feedback filters, Deus Ex was a very popular kind of get out of jail free card. If you had to check a face down Jinteki card, it's fetchable with SMC. I think we might see one-offs of that coming back into Shaper builds as well.
So whilst we're on the topic of runner changes affecting Jinteki, I'd like to point out one more thing. In my personal opinion, the loss of Parasite is a major benefactor to Jinteki as well.
Oh, yeah.
Kakugo becomes ridiculously scary. Kobainu it will probably gain a little bit in popularity again. Jinteki has a lot of high impact, relatively expensive low strength ice, which is more viable to run without Parasite in the meta.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That is a very good point. I haven't actually thought about that. Wow, Kakugo is now very scary, maybe even oppressive. But
time to pack your knives.
Yes, everyone's going to run knives.
If that, right? I mean, for me, I think it's quite clear that not only does the core set winner clearly come out as Jinteki, but I think Jinteki is probably going to be the competitive meta winner as well. Certainly, they've got the most diverse set of strategies. They've got some of the most powerful IDs in the game.
Yep.
Now, Ag Infusion is very, very scary in a meta where dealing with high-strength ice is very, very difficult. You can't simply cipher away Chiashi. You can't Parasite, DNA Tracker, and then Yogg through it for free. I'm seriously expecting a Jinteki renaissance in the competitive meta.
Now,
I agree with Trish. I think if you look at Jinteki's ID pool, I think Polana will be viable. I think Ag Infusion will be viable. IG will be viable. I'm sure people will start bringing PE back to events as well. So it's been a long time since we've seen any faction which has 4 potentially viable tournament IDs at the same time.
And they're all viable because they all serve different niches. They have different archetypes. There are like 3 big archetypes in Jinteki, and they are all equally, I won't say equally viable, but they are all viable. You have net damage, you have Glacier, and you have fast advance. So
I also think we forgot Tenon Institute as the 5th ID that makes an appearance, particularly with both Trick of Light and Shipment from Tenon in the Jinteki card pool. I think that is an ID that is a big winner out of the new core set.
Yeah, and as was mentioned earlier, the reason why Jinteki is now the premier fast advanced faction of choice is because they have the most 3-2 agendas. They have Philotic, 1, they have brain trust, and they have medical breakthrough. So that's 7 so-called fast advanced agendas, which is more.
It's worth pointing out you can also fast advance Nisei with double shipment. So
Yeah.
I mean, their pool of fast advanceable agendas is enormous.
Yes.
Yep. And even though these archetypes are losing a big card in each, the net damage is archetype loses Fetal, Glacier loses Caprice, and Fast Advance loses Clone Retirement, so no more 2-1s for Jinteki. But they're still pretty strong. I'd like to hear what everyone thinks about losing Caprice. I mean, we all saw this coming, but it is a pretty big hit to Glacier, and it probably will become the least viable of all 3 archetypes.
Maybe. I think Jinteki now splashes for Ash in the same way that Food Codes used to splash for Caprice. Especially given that a card that I know we're about to talk about, Celebrity Gift, makes it back into the core set. Mahalo! I am really excited to see that they kept Celebrity Gift, because I was super worried about what Ag Infusion was going to do for economy in the absence of that card. The fact that they've kept it is, I think, important recognition that the economy option in medical research fundraiser is a little bit dicey, and that Jinteki needs, I think, more interesting and more powerful economy operations to keep that kind of operation-based Glacier, I think.
I mean, I don't even care about Jinteki Econ. Who cares? The most important thing is the teacup giraffe is back. Everyone wants a giraffe. And Rich, you yourself are going to host a celebrity gift tournament yourself. So I'm sure you're very happy that this is staying.
I am stoked that this card is back. I am super pleased. It's been like my mascot for my charity event. So I'm really pleased it's not consigned to a folder somewhere, especially as I gave a bunch of signed ones out last year. So people will still be able to use that. I'm really, really pleased they brought that back. I am super bummed they got rid of Fetal. I think Fetal was a nicely designed trap ID, but trap agenda, but it's precisely.
Exactly. Like,
anyway, before we go on, since we are on celebrity gift,
wait.
Sorry, Rich, can you give a shout out to your celeb gift tournament? Like, tell people what it is for those who don't know.
Okay. I am going to plug my thing. Thank you, Ben. Right, so this year I'll be running my 3rd Celebrity Gift event here in Sheffield. We run it every year. It is a 32-person blind bid auction tournament where you will bid for a pair of IDs. You will be the only person on that day playing that pair of IDs, and it will be a 5-round Swiss. We gave away a huge amount of prizes last year. We also have Netrunner celebrity pairing. So I've reached out to people in the community who mostly have been extremely responsive, and they've got back to me. They are going to be providing some signed cards, and I've got sets of alt art IDs, customs to give away. It's been really successful for the past 2 years. Last year we raised over £1,500 for Sheffield Children's Charity. I'm really excited to run it again this year. So if you're interested, the link to the event should be in the description of this video. If Ben has done that for me, fantastic.
Yep.
And the first set of auctions for the first 16 places will be going live on the 25th of September. And if you watch the Netrunner Dorks and the UK Netrunner players feeds on Facebook, you will see me spamming publicity for the event in there over the next couple of weeks. So I really hope you could all make it up. Tris made it up last year and by all accounts had a good time. So hopefully everyone else can come out and have fun as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
had enjoyed it so much.
Sorry. Yeah. I heard.
I was going to say.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I enjoyed it so much I came back to Sheffield twice more.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I heard it's pretty fun. It's a shame I haven't been to one of these, but yeah, do take part for all of you out there listening. So yeah, back to our regularly scheduled broadcast. Yakuza, you were saying.
Well, now I'm going to jump back on the celebrity gift event. I've heard it's actually that legendary and that good that I'd personally considered flying over for it. So, and probably I won't make it, but it's so good. I recommend everyone to drop by. Now, as to the card celebrity gift, I'd like to raise one more point. I think it's a really interesting card to offer to new players in a new core. It teaches newcomers about the worth of information, about showing what's in your hand, about tricking the runner. I think it's a really interesting card for a new player.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Because we have Celeb Gift, we won't have Sundew. Since we only have one econ card per faction. Sundew.
I didn't like.
Yeah.
Sundew.
Yeah, it feels like a relic from the 2015 meta. It's been pretty rare that I've been put in a position where I thought, "Oh, I really need to go and contest the Sundew in this remote." In the past 18 months. Like there are better options. There are better spots to spend your assets on if you're going to go that way. There is better operation economy, more consistent operation economy than there was when Sundew was first printed. I don't think it's a big loss.
That is true. And with RP rotating out anyway, which is the natural home for Sundew, I guess it's time that Sundew goes. So chat has been talking a lot about Caprice. There have been very mixed opinions. Yeah, some people just don't like losing to Caprice, and that's a very fair point. And yeah, I think in general, even though some competitive players are really attached to the fact that Caprice actually enables a Glacier archetype, I think most people are happy to see it go. Not most, maybe some. Just because you can no longer be hard walled out just because you lose a couple of side games.
I think... Go ahead, Rich.
I think the fact that FFG printed not one, not two, but three different cards, which, while they have a wider reach, were pretty specifically aimed at just taking out Caprice, probably says a lot about how they feel or the feedback they've been getting from players who've played against it. Now, I like Caprice. I think she's an interesting defensive upgrade, but I think maybe there is a better way to design a card that does the same thing, which doesn't feel like you are kind of losing and not being able to control your own destiny quite in the same way that losing a side game to Caprice feels.
Yep, Tris?
So I think this speaks a lot to why I'm conflicted about the new core, because it seems like this core is very much aimed towards solving problems that made the casual experience of playing Netrunner unfun for a lot of players. Removing cards like Account Siphon, cards like Yogg, like Parasite. These are all cards that enabled so-called degenerate strategies that people don't find a lot of fun to play against when they aren't heavily invested in competitive tournament play and have to spend countless hours figuring out strategies to deal with things like Caprice. It saddens me as a competitive player that we're losing cards like this with seemingly very few replacements. I don't think Marcus Batty, for instance, is a good replacement for Caprice at all. I am not sure Ash is a good replacement for Caprice. And it's sad to me that competitive Netrunner has to take the fall in order to make the casual game a little bit more interesting for players, largely because I think it makes the competitive game a lot less interesting. That being said, competitive players don't make up the majority of the people who play this game. So from a business perspective, I think this is absolutely the correct decision. And from a gameplay perspective, I think it's really healthy for the game that this is the way things are. That being said, it's still really sad.
Yeah,
Sure.
It's an interesting perspective because there is kind of a feedback loop. If you don't take care of the competitive side of things, people are going to watch high-level tournaments and see degenerate nonsense happen. Like, if Glacier is not viable, people are going to resort to, very degenerate means of victory, and people will start thinking that the game sucks, not just from the competitive point of view. So
sure, and I think it's worth mentioning that any deck that does well and features prominently at lots of different tournaments is going to be considered degenerate for one reason or another. I know there was a lot of discussion on Kenny Deacon's post on Netrunner Dorks talking about the fact that, Shapers being able to sit back and click for 8 using Magnum Opus so that they can just remote camp is incredibly oppressive and might be the next big deck from the competitive side of things, just because of how powerful it will be to be able to prevent the Corp from scoring out of a remote. And I think that kind of Netrunner is very, very boring for a lot of people. And so degenerate decks in that sense will always exist at high tier competitive play because players gravitate towards the most efficient and the most powerful decks. So I don't know if the existence of a new core does anything to solve that fundamental quote unquote problem with the game. But, it's a cool core set, right? We've got lots of exciting new cards and it's brought a lot of people back. So it's a good thing that we've got it, if not necessarily for the competitive community.
Yeah.
Sure. And let me offer like a counterpoint to that, and it's a more kind of fundamental thing. I agree with you. I think losing the power cards out of this core set, like you and I and Ben have probably played every card that is being rotated out of this new core set in a top cut somewhere. But what this does for us as competitive players is widens the market for people playing Netrunner. Like, it doesn't matter if we have a tournament where there's only 8 people playing. I would much rather have less tools to play with, but more people to play with. And that, I think, is the big win for this. Being able to go to a GNK where we've struggled to get 4 people and seeing 10 or 12 people back here will improve the competitive scene because it will make people want to think about playing Netrunner competitively more.
Sure. My worry is that the disconnect between what competitive Netrunner looks like and what casual Netrunner looks like, as a result of this new core set, might turn people off competitive play simply because people aren't interested in playing the kind of Netrunner that comes with high tier competitive play. But I take your point, and I think it is very exciting to know that certainly for GNKs, for store championships, we can definitely expect more people because of more interest in the game as a result of the core, and that's awesome.
Yeah, this casual competitive thing opens a whole can of worms. Back to Jinteki. Any other Jinteki cards anyone likes to talk about?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. Do we want to go potato or rotato first?
Go, your choice.
Okay, I'll go rotato first.
Okay.
I'll be very sad to see precognition go. And that's not a joke.
I think that's absolutely fair. Having watched some of the earlier competitive world, sort of the 2012, 2013 meta, it was really cool to see what people were doing with precognition, both in Jinteki and in HB. So it's kind of sad to be losing a card like that.
It's a good teaching card. It's a fun card. It might not be the most competitively viable card, but it's a card that I personally hold sweet memories to. And I'm pretty sure most new players, everybody who started with a Corp was like, precognition, ABT, this is brilliant.
On the bright side, I think there's infinite use precognition in Bamboo Dome. Is that the card? So
yeah, it is.
Yes.
Not all is lost.
And
fair enough.
And also, Yakuza, like hasty relocation is very quickly looking for a new home somewhere. So maybe that can be the new precognition once accelerated diagnostics disappears.
Fair enough. And then I'll go potato. I'm really happy that FFG, that we have, that we gained Himetsu Bako and Swordsman. I'll jump forward a bit. We got Wraparound and Swordsman saved from rotation, which is really important to me. And I think it's really important for the game as a whole to have a safety valve and good safety valves on AI use. The verdict is still out on Amakua. The verdict is still out on most of the new AI stuff. But it's important to have safety valves, and Wraparound has always been one of the most reliable and best safety valves on AI.
Yep.
And Swordsman as well.
Pretty good point. Yep.
The other thing that's probably worth pointing out in terms of Jinteki being the big winners here, like if you look at the cards that are rotating, each Corp faction is losing about 5 or 6. Every other faction, HB, MBN, and Weyland, are losing kind of role-defining, powerful cards, and Jinteki is losing Zaibatsu Loyalty, Cell Portal, Chum, Data Mine, Akitara, Watanabe, and Precognition. Like, they have just had the fat cut away and replaced with great cards from the first 2 sets.
Hey, don't you dare undermine Data Mine. But yeah.
Data Mine was the one that I was thinking, hey, that's probably okay. But yeah.
But yeah, I take your point. Yeah, Data Mine. I mean, not Data Mine. Yeah, Jinteki came out as a clear winners here.
Can I touch on 3 cards before we jump on?
Yep.
That we are losing. The first one, Edge of World. It is tragic to me that we are losing the excitement of forcing the runner to run on the Edge of World brain damage death card. That is really, really tragic, and I think Jank players all over the world are going to be crying in shame at the loss of that card. It's really, really tragic. The second one is the card that I think has some of the best art in Netrunner, in dedicated server. It's so sad to me that this card never got played, because the art on it is so beautiful. Oh my goodness. Please, FFG, if you're listening to me and you want to save a piece of art of one card in rotation, make a dedicated server, please.
And the poem as well. The flavor text is so good.
So good. Oh, it's a magnificent card. I just wish it was playable. And of course, the last one, which is I think actually an important one to talk about, specifically with regards to Jinteki's strategies and net damage, is the loss of Hokusai Grid.
Mm-hmm. It's in the core.
No.
It's in the core.
Yeah.
What?
Tris, Hokusai is in the core.
Oh God, no! Oh no! I was going to talk about how glad I was to see this card go. God, I hate this card.
It gives me great joy to break your heart, Tris.
Oh, Richard, I'm so sad. Please hug me.
Oh, Hokusai.
All right, well, all hope is lost. Their Jinteki is too powerful. We all bow before our new potato overlords.
Yes, PU coming to a theater soon near you. All right. Yeah. So that's Jinteki for you. Time is running out. We'll move on to what arguably is the faction that has lost the most in this Core 2.0. It's NBN. Should we start with the good side or the bad side?
We should do the bad side because we all just want to talk about the bad side.
All right, so look at the screen. This whole bunch of yellow cards are gone. Gone.
It's like every NBN win condition with a big red X over the front of it.
Exactly.
It's so sad.
So yeah, there were 2 main ways to win as NBN. Either you go Tag Storm or you go Fast Advance, you know, like back in the days of what you call the Astro Trains. Yeah. Now Fast Advance is no longer viable. Astro is gone, Sansan Grid is gone, and you can't even import stuff from HB like Jeeves because shipment is no longer there to combo with Jeeves. What about the tag side? Tags are losing the proactive tagging. A lot of proactive tagging cards are going. Breaking News is gone, Mid-Seasons is gone, and even though no one played Restructured Data Pool, it's the last thing that we have for proactively tagging the runner. So, well, what do we have left? I don't know.
You have to hope that runners let you hard-hitting news them. Like, that is the only way you're going to land more than one tag out of NBN anymore, or you force them to run through data ravens. I don't know. Like, NBN got dumpstered so incredibly hard here. It's like I've never seen quite such a fall from grace.
This, to me, is a massive overreaction to the prevalence of CTM about 6 months ago. And, like, I'm despondent about what's happened to NBN. I'm not going to go so far as to say they are the new Weyland, because Weyland still has Weyland problems, to be sure. But it seems like Weyland is getting more interesting, more exciting, better cards in later packs, and we just haven't seen anything that comes close to that for NBN. And the fact that they're losing so many powerful cards, to me, says that FFG is tired of NBN being dominant, but also that it's responding to people's complaints about so-called overpowered IDs like CTM. And I think it's really, really sad for the game that NBN has been kicked so hard in the teeth.
Yeah.
Hashtag unpopular opinion.
No, you're absolutely right. From what I heard, this Core 2 was kind of like in the works of finalize at around like Worlds last year. And yeah, indeed, when NBN when every single top 16 player from the Worlds Cup was NBN, people were like, there's something wrong, something needs to be fixed, and sure, but this is a bit too much.
I agree.
Personally,
I think it's also...
Yeah, go ahead.
It's worth pointing out that a lot of the reason why that was because the cards that specifically dealt with powerful NBN strategies, particularly Tag Storm, which people remember have been calling for ages. A tag-based strategy that doesn't result in scorched earth wins. They wanted more interesting things to do with tags, and CTM, I think, fit the bill magnificently. It was a really cool idea. It had a really powerful ability, and it gave you more interesting things to do with tags that didn't immediately end the runner's game. I know for a lot of new players, getting hard-hitting news was really scary and felt like the end of the world, but you could come back from being hit with hard-hitting news tags.
I think the big thing is that since then, hate cards have been printed for this
exactly
archetype, like Aaron.
We've got Aaron, Misdirection. I mean, Aaron has been single-handedly responsible for chasing CTM out of the meta, and that card to me was a huge design mistake. It's unbelievable to me that a card like that got printed, but the fact that it exists, I think, did enough to dampen the effectiveness of that strategy in conjunction with putting Sension at tier 3. Yeah. I mean, I've been playing a lot with my Ben's CTM deck that I've been tinkering around with, and you can feel just how underpowered it is compared to what it used to be. I think that is absolutely perfectly acceptable ID to play at the moment, and that build seems fair to me. It's really sad that just cannot be played for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I think this speaks to the volumes of how hard it is to design a game. Like, just one new card can completely shift the balance. Not to mention removing 6 or maybe at least 5 key cards from the NBN arsenal. I'm particularly disappointed that Breaking News was taken out because I think
that's huge.
That card is really what defines NBN and what I think NBN needs, because what we want to see from the Corp side is proactive strategies, not just sit back, wait for the runner to get tagged, or play a long drawn out game with acid spam. No, you want proactive strategies, cards that proactively help, like with Jinteki, they have Neuro EMP, and especially Ronin that was brought back from the dead. If you successfully manage to advance a Ronin, you get the reward, your 3 net damage. Same thing. NBN, if you successfully advance an agenda, you should get those 2 proactive tags if the runner chose not to run.
And I think it's worth pointing out that losing Breaking News is also surprising, given that we lost both Sansan and Astro, which is what enabled, I think, a lot of the kinds of strategies that players objected to. The ability to just, from your hand, score a Breaking News into closed accounts, into hard-hitting news. I mean, it's a completely different game if you've got to put Breaking News on the table and try and force the runner to say to them, do you think it's a Breaking News? Come and check it, I dare you.
Yes.
I think that, to me, is a much more interesting game. And I think it would have been exciting to have that kind of game be what NBN is all about. The kind of, I'm going to put something on the table. Is it a Mumbad Virtual Tour? Is it a Breaking News? You come and check at your peril. And I think, losing Sansa and Astro would have been absolutely acceptable for keeping Breaking News in the card pool. That being said, I think we would have then had to lose 24/7. I think the part of the reason why we've lost Breaking News is because of the ease of the 24/7 boom combo. And I don't know if I'm okay with that. I think an errata to 24/7 would have been a better move than just taking Breaking News out of the card pool.
Yeah, to me, it's very clear which card of the 2 is responsible for the problem being 24/7. So
yes, exactly.
Breaking News was pretty okay design and really shouldn't have gone.
Yeah. And I think it's probably worth talking about how overall, landing meat damage has become incredibly difficult with this current rotation. Boom requires 2 tags, and landing 2 tags which stick on a runner without access to Breaking News and mid seasons. And if you want to get crazy, we're losing Posted Bounty as well, and we're losing Scorch, so we can't hurt them with 1 tag. I think meat damage is going to take a huge dip in in its viability as a win condition for Corps across the board.
Maybe. I think meat damage doesn't become an insta-win condition. I think it becomes more akin to the kinds of 1,000 cuts style win conditions that we saw out of PE a couple of years back. I mean, there are a couple of cards that we'll probably touch on when we get to the Weyland section, but Weyland does have a number of ways to deal out small bits of meat damage here and there that do remain in the card pool. But there's definitely no insta game over, you've taken the tag, you've screwed up, and now you're double scorched or now you're boomed and that's the end of your game. Maybe that's healthy for the game. I don't think so.
Well,
I don't either.
Yeah, meat damage is going to be that way. It's going to be incremental rather than burst, but we can talk about that later. Tags are the same thing, and I'm also not sure if this is good for the game. I really don't fancy the best NBN deck being one that sits behind all the Data Ravens, all the Thoths, all the Turnpikes, and waits for the runner to make one wrong run. That's boring to me.
On the meat damage topic, I get the distinct impression that Damon and Boggs have tried to... Oh wait, was Boggs involved in revised core, Ben?
Yes, apparently he was. Sorry for Ben for jumping in, but this is a thing that I have picked up from the Netrunner Dorks pages.
Sure.
Okay, fair enough. I get the distinct impression that they want to decouple, that they want to remove the... how do I say this?
Tag and
Yeah, the tag and bag strategy.
yeah,
that they
we'll
want
talk
to
about that when we
remove
go
the
to
connection.
Weyland. Yeah.
Okay, good.
All right. So I think we've said enough about what NBN's losing. Let's see what they gain. Okay, so they get
Pop-up
Pew.
window!
They get Pew.
No.
They get Pew. That's something.
Yes.
And they have psychographics to go with it. So that combo is still a thing. I mean, you can't
If you
enable
can
it
land
with
the
mid-seasons.
tags, right?
Yeah, no mid-seasons. Good luck with that. But yeah, I find it very surprising that Psycho is actually a 3-off in the core set. In the new core
For
set.
me, the more interesting one is, why is Seesaw still in the core set?
It's
Like,
so
I know
good-
it's because you need to have ways for new players to land a single tag, but, 2 Seesaws, 3 psychographics? What? How are you going to land tags on the runner? Like, what?
And for the record,
To me,
there's no Big Brother in the core set, if I'm not wrong. So, yeah.
There's also no tag-based... looks like the only tag-based trap is Ghost Branch, and I mean... Yeah, cool. Like, cool. I mean... It's such a weird mix to me. I would have definitely done it the other way around. 3 Seesaws, 2 Psycho, if you're gonna do that at all. But
Like, I think Seesaws is just included to teach runners, to teach corps, hey, you can tag the runner and kill that annoying asset as long as it's not Aaron Marin. Or you can Seesaws them and close the counts them if your money is like double what theirs is.
Yeah, but that's about it. And
Yeah.
it's too much relying... I mean, there are too many cards here that rely on the runner having a lot of tags and not enough ways to actually give those tags proactively. So
I think it's also especially jarring given that tag me strategies on the runner side no longer exist in the core set. It was possible, unlikely but possible, in previous core sets to just play a count siphon a couple of times and hold on to those tags. You can't do that anymore. So the runners are not taking tags for you to punish them. You have to proactively put the tag on the runner. And Seesaws to me seems like a absolutely garbage way of doing that.
that is an incredibly good point that I didn't notice. Yeah, thanks a lot for bringing that up. Yeah, I think that was an interesting dynamic that makes faction choice, if you're playing a core set game, very interesting. Now, it's not there. Alright, I guess we'll move on to money cards. So, we get pop-up windows.
Yes!
Select
Which means
gifts.
I can keep my ugly Altarts! Yes!
I mean, for the core set, I love pop-up window, don't get me wrong, but while everyone's getting beanstalks, green levels, and select gifts, we're getting pop-up window.
Yeah, why no Sweep Sweep?
We're not even getting Sweet Sweet. I don't know. What do y'all think about Sweet Sweet going?
I love Sweep Sweep. Why is this card disappearing? This is another reason why you can't play competitive CTM anymore. Can't actually play any competitive yellow deck that's reliant on tags. Because not only does your tagging mechanism rely on you having more money than the runner, you're taking away the one money card that made it more likely that you would have more money than the runner in the first place. Oh, I despair for NBN.
Yeah, it's bad. Losing Sweep Sweep is a big blow. As a perennial lover of the Spark ID, I'm super pleased to see Pop-Up Window back in the core. It's great. Good work, everybody. And yeah, I get to use my ugly alt arts as well, which is really fun. But like Pop-Up is no substitute for Sweep Sweep.
Oh yeah, absolutely not.
I mean, yes. The thing is, now that they're shifting out all this, I mean, the operation economy that NBN relied on so much, now the only real viable way to play NBN is asset spam. because you just don't have enough economy if you are going to go vertical with ice, something like a Soul Glacier, which someone mentioned on the chat. So yeah, you can try to play Soul Glacier or whatever, Soul whatever. Good luck with that. You're not gonna have enough money. Hedge, IPO, that's it. If you're not spamming out paired campaigns and NASEX and trying to threaten hard-hitting news, you're just not gonna get enough money to do what you want to do.
And even if you are playing Soul Glacier, how do you score when the runner's fully set up? As soon as the runner has its economy and its breaker set, you put an agenda in a remote and they go and take it. And you don't have any way of forcing the issue.
Yep. The runner can simply sit back and wait until the Corp advances something to go get it. NBN doesn't have... Yeah, NBN's no longer a fast advanced faction. All you have is Project Builds without sense. Good luck with scoring that. So yeah, I feel the worst thing to come out of this is that by taking away all the traditional win cons of NBN, the only viable archetype left is asset spam. Why are we encouraging asset spam? It's beyond me.
Yeah, especially because NEH does not rotate, shockingly, and, still has a lot of good assets to be played. And it's way better than making news, given the uselessness of traces in the core set. Here's one thing that I've just noticed. I've just managed to pull up the list of cards. There is one way of tagging the runner that we forgot to mention, which is they've included Bernice Mai as an upgrade. Now, it's not the best, but it does mean that you can, in theory, build Data Raven into Bernice Mai servers that can lead to tag sticking.
And
that being said,
TGBT is in there as well, Tris. So, you can install Advance, a TGTBT, that thing, in your Bernice Mai and Data Raven server and land someone with 3 tags and then play Psychographics and score a Beal. I mean, it still doesn't feel like a great payoff.
It's something, I guess.
It's like, because I was going to make the point that, if they were going to keep any sort of tag-based cards from the remaining set that aren't being rotated out, Bernice seems to me to be the obvious one that needs to be in the set to make tags even remotely viable as a strategy. So it's good to see her there. Question mark?
Yeah.
It's literally like you're putting a Band-Aid on a wound that's, on someone's leg that's already been lopped off. I do not understand.
And if we're going to talk about insane includes in the core set for NBN, what on earth is Flare doing in there at 9 credits? I
have absolutely no idea, but I will say my favorite Netrunner celebrity, Sanjay, loves the fact that Flare is included, and for that reason, I am delighted that Flare is included. That is it. There's nothing more to say on this issue.
Well, good luck getting the money to rest Flare. That's all I'll say.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Any other NBN cards?
No, I think I just look at this list and swallow my tears sadly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, we can only hope that better cards are coming from NBN in the next cycle. It's not happening. Yep. So let's move on to greener pastures, both literally and figuratively, in Weyland. So the project agenda for Weyland is Project Atlas, and we are keeping Atlas. I think the most interesting project agenda in the entire game.
Titan players rejoice around the world as their ID ability is saved.
I am currently rejoicing.
For me, I think this card was, unbelievably important to just about any kind of Weyland deck that you were constructing, largely because of the signature problem that has vexed all Weyland players since the beginning of time, the Weyland problem. How do you get to 7 points? Yeah. And in the absence of Project Atlas, what are you relying on? Your agendas are absolute garbage, completely horrible outside of Oaktown renovation.
And so, hostile.
Which we only have one of in the new color set. Just, we will talk about that in a second. Yes, and hostile. But, I am delighted because I think Weyland is on the verge of a major comeback. We're seeing really, really cool options being printed from Weyland. And it feels like they're 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 power cards away from being actually competitively viable. And to me, I think one of the linchpins to ensure that that's even remotely possible is keeping Project Atlas. If they lost Project Atlas, Weyland would just be the mini faction for the rest of time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah. Well,
Yep. Yakuza.
Well, yeah. When I took a look at the rotation, at what would rotate out in Genesis and Spin Cycle, the one thing that came up to me was Project Atlas, and Project Atlas being saved is huge for Weyland. It's huge for Titan especially, but it's huge for the entire faction. Titan and Weyland look very appealing to me at the moment. I've written down possibly tier 1. I'm not sure. You guys can probably better assess that point.
I don't know if I'd go so far as to say tier 1, but I think they're on the up, right? They're definitely tier 1.5 if nothing else.
Sure.
They've gotten so many tools in the Flashpoint cycle, in the Red Sand cycle. Finally, some decent ice. Finally, some decent operations like Audacity and Prycon and Mass Commerce. It's looking very good to me. So actually, in my opinion, Jinteki came out first in revised core, but Weyland definitely came out second.
Yeah, I would agree.
There's a good argument to make for that. Yep.
Yeah, I think it's worth having a look at some of the important cards that Weyland lost for certain IDs. I'm thinking of Blue Sun in particular, but I think we can get to that
we'll get
after
to that
we've done
later.
the victory cards.
So, Hostile, while we are on agendas, I think Hostile's a beautifully designed 2-1 agenda, and is how 2-1 agendas should be designed. So, with Hostile, Weyland is now the only faction with a full 3-off playset of 2-1 agendas. So
if you buy 3 core sets, Ben, there's only one in the revised core.
Yes, of course, in standard play, I meant. But yes, there's only one in revised core. A bit of a pity, but...
that to me seems like a weird decision. I'm not really sure why. It seemed like...
Because they wanted to keep cleaners. Don't you get it?
But why?
I'm sure that there are people around the country who can buy their revised core and go on eBay and find people offloading their original set Hostile Takeovers, of which I have 6, and I'm sure lots of other people have 6 as well.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, that's agendas. You can fast advance with these agendas. Not as good as Jinteki, but it's something. All right, so I think the next good topic to move on is actually meat damage, and I think Yakuza, you wanted to talk about this with regards to decoupling meat damage from tags.
Yeah, I get the distinct impression that that was something that Damon and Boggs were intending to do, and something that I've always thought about was how tag punishment is so how do I say this, one and done. You either have some tags and die, or
you don't, and
yeah,
you live.
or you don't and you live. So cards like closed accounts, like help me out here, the resource thrasher from Data and Destiny.
All-Seeing Eye?
Yeah, All-Seeing Eye.
Best defense, I think.
Yeah, best defense as well. They felt so underpowered compared to something like a Scorched or a Boom. And the thing here is what I find very interesting is two things that are happening now. One, meat damage protection in form of a resource becomes more viable by decoupling tags from meat damage, which is very interesting. Things like Agura Devinder become semi-viable, I don't know, but they become more interesting to look at the very least. And the second point is, and this is something a dear friend of mine always commented, why is the number of tags never been very relevant? And I get the distinct impression that FFG is moving in that direction. The card you just mentioned, Best Defense, is a pretty good example. Boom, just hitting or firing off 2 tags and not just a single one, is a good example, and Psychographics is a good example. I get this distinct impression that FFG is moving tag punishment toward making the number. That's what I was looking for. Thank you, Ben.
So,
and it's, I think you made a really interesting point there, which I hadn't considered, which is that when you look at punitive Counter-Strike from this set, and the fact that Crash Space still exists. Crash Space always felt like such a pointless card in the original core, because you would get tagged, then they would trash your Crash Space for 2 credits, then they would scorch you. And now you can get punitived and have your crash space in play and sack it for its effect, and they don't interact in the same way. The punitive doesn't automatically make the crash space irrelevant.
Exactly. That always felt like a design error to me. So them removing that is a fine design movement, in my opinion.
I felt really stupid because for a long time I've been moaning about the fact that FFG kept printing resources that attempted to protect you from meat damage. Now I see sort of where they were going with it. Like, I understand, for instance, why Citadel Sanctuary is a reasonable card to include, why the Urognev Mercs can be included in decks that aren't just going tag me and attempting to try and wireless net Pavilion out a whole bunch of resources to prevent it from being trashed. I think this kind of interaction is really, really cool. I like the fact that meat damage is not now insta-death. I like the fact that, it only kills you if you don't play very, very carefully, and the Corp has 2 punitives in hand, for instance, barring any government takeover shenanigans. Here is, I think, the question that is closest on my mind when it comes to meat damage. How do you play Boom in Weyland now? How do you do it?
You use hard-hitting news and false lead.
But I don't know. I mean, that to me seems like such a rubbish. Well, no, hang on. You can't use false lead. False lead also rotates out, doesn't it?
No,
it's in the core.
No.
What?
Yes.
God, I'm discovering so many exciting things.
Or,
this is brilliant.
Yeah, as some people from the chat mentioned, you can hard-hitting news into Zealous Judge. Gagarin Asset Spam is back. Woohoo!
Gagarin Asset. Looking at dedicated response team, the first thing I thought was Gagarin Asset Spam, and that kind of concerns me a little bit.
Yeah,
but it's important to have a meat damage asset.
I don't know. Someone educate me. Why is dedicated in the core set?
Ben, I was just about to ask the same question.
There's nothing that gives tags on the Weyland side. Even Posted Bounty, which is really, really bad synergy if you didn't realize, that is not in the core set anymore. So, what gives?
Go on.
It's a valuable teaching tool. That's the only thing I can imagine.
But how does the runner get tagged? They can't even tag themselves.
Ben, it's for snare.
Snare or for Data Raven.
Yeah. Fine.
I think maybe this teaches people that splashing out creates interesting synergies.
Yeah.
Maybe.
No, the thing is, what I think it mainly does is it teaches people it teaches new core players to ask the question, do you want to access?
I guess. Yeah, even then, snare is only a 2-off in the core set, so...
Okay, fair enough.
Oh yeah,
seems to me like this problem would have been solved by just making Prisec green.
Yeah. And replace dedicated response team with Prisec. Make it Weyland.
Yeah, Tagore just gave a good shout out. Hunter is in the core set. So, well, it's something. It's
Tagore, I love you so much.
Anyway, I think we haven't given enough love to Punitive yet. I think I like it as a Scorch.
I'm delighted that it's in the core set. I think it's the kind of thing that's got more counterplay. I mean, that was one of the things I made mention of earlier with regards to Ash's design. I think all those comments apply to Punitive. There's counterplay on the runner's side, and that's so important, especially when you're dealing with something that can just be an insta-win condition, like meat damage flatline.
Yep, I like the design of Punitive as well. I think it's very clever. I have witnessed way back in the mists of kind of 2014 and early 2015, people playing Weyland Punitive decks where you would see someone steal a 5-3 and their opponent sit and go, okay, do I have enough to Punitive them twice? And it's really, I think it's a great design because it decouples that and also teaches people that Weyland fork where you go, here's an agenda which I know you can come and steal, but after you've spent the money to steal it, are you still safe from me killing you?
And I love the theme, how they preserve the theme of Weyland being very aggressive and punitive, really, with what they dish out. So Weyland is keeping some good cards. Their meat damage is being preserved. They have good agendas. What are they going to lose out? So obviously we're going to lose Scorched Earth. Anyone going to miss Scorched Earth here?
Yes. This is the thing which I think is the biggest miss in the Core 2 for me, only because I think being Scorched is such a kind of rite of passage for new players, and it teaches you a lot of fundamental understanding about not only watching your own credit pool, but watching your opponent's credit pool and watching your cards in hand count. And I think losing it means that part of the game will disappear for a lot of new players, and when some meat damage kill strategy does appear, they're going to go, what? We were never made aware this could exist. And especially keeping Seasource in and taking Scorched out makes no sense to me at all. I think it's a real shame that it's gone. And also, it's got great art.
And the alt art is amazing.
Yes.
Is also very, very sad.
I'm going to be very sad to lose my Scorched Out Alt Earth. No longer playable.
So for all the reasons I just mentioned about making tags and more about making the thing non-binary, I actually don't mind seeing Scorched Earth go. It is a great teaching tool, but it will be replaced in a new cycle. I'm looking forward to Urban Renewal personally.
Yeah, something that's not related to tags, right? Yeah. And
no, it's a meat damage asset.
Asset, great.
Yeah, different problem, but let's not go into that.
Yeah, we'll go into that another time. So yeah, that's Scorched Earth. Yes.
Also, as a little tiny aside, is the disappearance of Scorched Earth. It might as well also have taken a traffic accident out with it, because I don't think that card does anything to anyone anymore.
Nope. I mean, we haven't seen Scorched Earth for the longest time ever since Boom came out. So Scorched Earth was pretty much dead in the competitive scene anyway. This was just the
sure. But I think if you have a core set where you take out Breaking News, but you don't take out Scorched Earth, you would see people going back to, okay, well, I'm going to try and double Scorch you or Scorch Traffic you to get the kill.
I think especially in the absence of Plascrete, right? That becomes a much more viable strategy. I think, meat damage is really difficult to kill the runner at the moment, because we've got way too many ways of dealing with it. But post-rotation, it's looking a little bit more reasonable.
Yep, we'll see. Power Shutdown's going as well. I mean,
good riddance.
Hooray!
Good riddance to bad rubbish.
So...
Silence, Ben. Silence.
It was a good card until its counterpart
Scorpius exists, Ben. Scorpius exists, and that just makes this card such a headache for criminals to deal with, because there's often nothing that you can do against this card. It's another card where I think there is no counterplay, because the counterplay is don't do the thing that's in the name of the game.
Yeah,
and that's silly.
I don't know. The counterplay is installing a zero-cost program like Fairy. Wait, no, that's rotating out. But you get the idea.
No, it's not. It's in the core set.
Oh, Fairy's in the core set! Ah!
This is great. I'm just going to spend all of this time telling people what's in the revised core.
But yeah, I mean, that I would have to disagree with you. There's definitely counterplay with Power Shutdown. Play more stuff.
I will genuinely fight you on this. Like, I will battle you properly, because that is a ridiculous opinion.
Because
the problem with Shutdown is that best defense exists, Hunter Seeker exists, and Power Shutdown was very rarely used for what it was supposed to be used for. It was used to enable degenerate combos, and even though that has been FAQ'd out, I think
it's gone. Diagnostics is completely gone.
Yeah, and there's FAQ on Power Shutdown as well, but I think it's just easier. It's like a clean sweep. They can go, this thing which was such a headache for us, we had to FAQ it. It was really bad. Let's just get rid of it. We'll print something else.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm more happy with the trash options that we've got at the moment, to be honest.
Yeah. But yeah, as you say, we do have Hunter Seeker and Best Defense. I just feel like, having more variety is good. But yeah, it can be an oppressive archetype, but we won't get into that. Another archetype that can potentially be oppressive is Crisium Off the Grid. That's no longer available as well.
Also means that Blue Sun is no longer available, though. I think, if you're taking both this and Oversight away from Blue Sun, what does it do?
I think Oversight is the big loss for Blue Sun.
Sure, but I think, Blue Sun loses both its economy and an important win condition that a lot of Blue Sun decks had in Crisium Off the Grid. I'm baffled by this decision.
I mean, to be perfectly fair, Blue Sun was never viable ever since E-Strike came out. As long as people are going to play E-Strike, Blue Sun may as well be dead in the water. E-Strike
that's
just
fair.
hurts it so bad. But yeah, that's another topic. So the Econ card for Weyland is Beanstalk, the always reliable easy mark. And we are going to get 3 off for that. So that's pretty decent. As for Econ cards, Weyland didn't actually get a lot of Econ cards in the first 2 cycles, which was why it sucked quite a bit. But yeah, the one card they did get was Grindel, your ID. And we are going to lose Grindel. So a bit sad for that.
But you do get Grindel Refinery, so Grindel lives on,
Yes.
I suppose.
Yes, I actually didn't include that here. Yes, Grindel Refinery is staying. That's quite important to know.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's going to be a lot of people who miss Grendel. In fact, I know a local player from Huddersfield, Steve Nemo Horsley, who played Grendel a lot in 2015, played a Grendel Rush deck and did very well with it. But nowadays, Weyland IDs look underpowered normally anyway, and 10 influence for the fact that you start with 5 extra credits and everything that in your deck costs 1 less to trash and all your servers cost 1 less to run at. It's like starting with 1 hand tied behind your back. It's such a bad ID.
It also, I mean, it's one of 3 40-card decks that Weyland has got. And I mean, when you're making the assessments, Grindel, Builder of Nations, or Scorpius, I mean...
it's 45.
Trish, Grendel's 45.
What? Why is the ID ever printed? What is this?
Trish,
God, it didn't even have a tiny deck size.
you need to brush up your card knowledge, man. You're too
I
into the
think
competitive cards.
I think it speaks volumes of the fact that I don't even know what this card says. Like,
Yeah,
wow, that card is bad.
I mean, it used to be good until AI breakers were a thing. You could actually viably rush out, but yeah now AI breakers are too good.
AI breakers being the thing that kills it. What? That seems bad. That seems bad for anything. I don't know, but sure, cool.
Good old times. Yeah, Grindel used to be good. Yakuza, I hear you have a long list of Weyland cards that you want to talk about. Lay it on us.
Well, it's not that long, but let's go potato.
Okay.
Potato. I'm happy to see Grendel Refinery be in the core. Grendel Refinery has always felt to me like a sort of a ruse, a trap in the non-trap faction. Are you going to trick people into running at that advanced Grendel? It's good that it's in the core, but that's already been covered. Also, very glad with Elizabeth Mills.
Yes.
It's not actually. If you take a look at the core, it's a bit silly, but because she only has, if I'm not mistaken, 2 actual targets, Aesops and Crash Space, if I'm not mistaken. But still,
hub removal is really good.
Yeah, as well. That as well. But it's important to have. It's important to have Lizzie Mills stay in the game. So I'm glad with her staying.
Can we quickly make a point about Elizabeth Mills from a competitive standpoint? Blue Moose is overpowered. We all know it. We know that it needs to go on the most wanted list.
Yeah.
It's nice that they're at least cognizant of the fact that locations like Blue Moose exist in the game and are powerful, and at least give one faction a way to deal with it somehow, some of the time, I think is really, really important.
Yeah, I think Mills's click trash location is an important balancing tool. Just going forward, it means that they can push the power level of locations, knowing that, okay, if this is a bit too strong, then hey, we can, maybe the meta will go towards Weyland. People play 3 Elizabeth Mills and blow up everyone's Blue Mooses all the time, or Soulset Slums, or whatever else is bothering you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And I'm glad I didn't invite to go on this video. Otherwise, he'll be going on about Lizzie Mills to no end. Yakuza, carry on.
On a purely personal note, I'm glad to see Caduceus saved. Always felt like a fine piece of ice to me. It's a good teaching tool. It's a good rush piece of ice. It's fine. Good that it's saved. And lastly, on the Rotato side, this might surprise you. I'm really sad to see Power Grid Overload go. Power Grid Overload would have been a fine card to save in a core set, in my opinion. One of the few proactive ways, a bad way, but still a proactive way that the Corp can deal with hardware.
That's a very good point. Yeah, that design space hasn't really been explored. It's mostly passive. You have Z 2.0.
Flare.
Yeah, and Lapdog.
Yeah.
Shattered Remains.
Yeah. But yeah, Power Grid Overload is actually proactive. So yeah, good point.
I think the reason that they've let Power Grid Overload disappear is purely because Plascrete's going away as well. Like, those two cards were kind of intended to play off each other, I think. And with Plascrete rotating away and meat damage making its way to the resource slot rather than the hardware slot, a Power Grid Overload had kind of done its job.
Fair enough. And one other thing I really liked about Power Grid Overlord was a small design space thing, namely the equal to or less than the amount by which your trace strength exceeds the runner's link strength. That's always felt like a really interesting small part of the design space that hasn't been explored that much.
Yep. And one last point before we round it off. A very good point brought up by Quagos from chat. Elizabeth Mill staying is actually very important thematically because public support is a thing and all that theme around this Weyland executive. So, yep, it's good that the character is still in play. Any other Weyland cards?
So can I mention two, just in terms of their numbers in the core set? Well, one because it's cool and one because of its numbers.
Go for it.
So I'm really excited that Hive has become a core set card. I think multi-sub barriers are super important in a game where paperclip is the de facto barrier breaker. And I think what's really cool about Hive is just the way in which it works. I think it was a really novel piece of ice. I think it's really cool and really interesting. I like the fact that, you install it, it becomes more useless over time. Basically, the better you are becoming at the game. And so I think it's cool that it's retained. I also think it looks a lot better in the absence of things like Parasite that could kill it quickly.
Tris,
Here's the problem with Hive.
You are objectively wrong.
Yeah, I'm with Ben here. The problem with Hive is that Hive directly encourages Corp strats which don't want to score to win. Like, every deck which plays 3 Hives intends to sit, do nothing interesting at all, and then eventually gradually grind you to paste.
Sure. Here's my counterpoint to this. In a meta where the ability to get agendas back into R&D and control their flow into your hand is reliant on Jackson Howard, and he doesn't exist, how do Corps do that successfully?
One power?
Okay, cool.
Because, this makes Gagarin asset spam pretty good. I'm not gonna lie.
I mean, is it any worse than the existence of Tour Guide, which already exists in the card pool?
Tour Guide is a different problem. Hive doesn't help it.
And also, here's the thing with Tour Guide, like, Fairy exists. So you can blow through a Tour Guide once. You still have to pay 6 credits to get through a Hive, or 5 with a paperclip. That's a huge investment to check what might be like a face-down pad campaign or something every single time, until it's something that you have to go and trash.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm of the opinion that runner economy is way too strong at the moment. And I'm worried about asset spam. Don't get me wrong on this. But I don't think that an upfront cost of 5, turn after turn to go and check cards is that unreasonable in an asset spam meta where Temujin exists and Neos Informus exist. I mean, we'll presumably talk about Desperado when the runner side discussion happens. But, I think there's enough runner economy that if you want to make those strategies viable, you kind of do need cards that tax the runner out when it comes to checking assets.
Sure.
Otherwise, they don't get played, right?
But at the end of the day, from a pure design point of view, Hive, what purpose does Hive serve in the game? It only encourages decks that don't score. If you're trying to actively score agendas, you don't really want Hive in your deck unless you.
See, I liked Hive in decks like Blue Sun, where you put it down early, you gave it your 5 credit investment. When it was useless, you popped it back into your hand and then discarded it because it was crap and replaced it with something else. I think it's important to have for that kind of ID, given that ID's got no love at the moment.
Yeah, but Blue Sun's going to rotate eventually. And
but all cards will rotate eventually. I mean,
not Hive.
Hive
is core.
No.
For now, Ben. I mean, Account Siphon was core, right? Been much sad. And
Anyway,
the second card
Yep.
the second card I wanted to make mention of was Archer at 1. Seems to me really bizarre given hostile takeover at 1. I get that Archer's really important and really cool, but who the hell is going to sack a Project Atlas to raise an Archer in 9 out of 10 games?
Wait, so you're saying that Archer should have been a 0?
No. I'm saying hostile should have been more if they want to make Archer a instead.
Fair. Yep. That's completely fair. I'm happy that Archer's staying, though. It's a great...
Yes, yeah,
too.
absolutely.
Yes.
I think it's a really important piece of ice to have in the game.
I mean, not just from a competitive point of view. I think it's an iconic piece of ice. It's like part of what drew me into playing Netrunner to start with was, hey, this is so powerful. I have to throw away some of my win condition to res it, but every time someone hits it and they can't break it, I feel like I've won the game.
That's the scariest piece of ice to face check in Netrunner, and I think I like the existence of 2-0 agendas in Weyland for this exact reason, because it turns Archer into way more of a threat.
It is the very definition of high cost, high reward, and I love that it's
Hey
still in the course.
Ben, you know this from first-hand experience. What happens when you phase plant into Archers consistently?
Shut up! That game didn't happen. You didn't see it. Okay. Yeah. Any more from the Weyland side?
No, I think we're good.
No, that's it.
Okay, we are done with the factions, but there's still some neutral cards we want to look at. One point I really want to bring up is Enderun Code Gates. We are losing Quandary. We are losing Nyx Bronze. There are no more cheap Enderun Code Gates. Enigma is the lowest at the price point, and I think that's quite big. It makes Rush less viable, and it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, but this is something to take into consideration.
Ironically, this would have been the time for Quandary and Next Bronze and other low-powered code gates to shine due to the leaving of Yogg and Parasite.
Yeah. Sadly,
Also, we lose the most adorable piece of flavor text in the entire game. I mean, shame, Quandary, so cute, shame.
Well, it has grown up into Conundrum, to be fair, but I really will miss Quandary.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
No,
and
and
me.
Quandary was such a mainstay of NBN as well. I think it's another kick in the gonads for NBN strategies. I mean, despondent for NBN, but it's also really sad to be losing Quandary for many other reasons.
Yeah, I agree.
And yeah, next Bronze is going, which also implies that the next Ice Suite will be crippled unless you play what's
the worst piece of ice ever printed, Ben?
Next Opal, yes!
Yeah, I was trying to find a word for that, like self-detrimenting. I
look forward to next Amethyst and next Pearl. I think that they will save us.
It's next Fire Red that I think will be the best one.
Thanks for making that reference for me. Okay. Yep. Another one I want to bring up is neutral agendas. We are losing NAPD. Thoughts?
Big. It's big.
Yeah.
I personally think NAPD should have been a 5-3. I think it would have made for a very good 5-3 design. So, hopefully, FFG, maybe?
Maybe. I think if you're going to make it 5-3, it needs to have more of a painful cost. I mean, one of the things that we've noted a lot, and I've said a lot, is that runner economy is really strong at the moment. So it often felt like 4 credits was a hit, especially in the early game. But come late game, I mean, paying 4 to steal an NAPD contract is nothing. So I think 5-3 might be pushing it.
I think that's mostly because runner economy is so strong now. Back when NAPD was first printed, it was nasty.
And I think, look, having this in the core set with limited economy options probably is not the best idea in the world. I mean, maybe you cycle it back as a 5-3, but I think it would then also need to have a really good ability on it in addition to the steel cost. It needs to look more like Beetle, I think.
Yeah, that's a perfectly fine. That's perfectly justifiable. I agree.
I'm sad to see NAPD go because I think that of all of the self-defending agendas, it's the one which had the easiest cost to overcome. Like I've very, very rarely seen a position where a runner has wanted to steal an NAPD and hasn't been able to because they didn't have the 4 credits.
You'll be surprised.
Yeah, I was saying. But generally, what it is it's that decision of how bad is it for me to spend these 4 credits and can I let this one go. And again, I'm sad because as a Spark enthusiast, NAPD always felt like if you're going to create an ID where you say to the runner your credit total matters, NAPD just felt like such a natural include into that archetype, and losing it takes away some of its ability to be even tier 2 competitive.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, at least there are a lot of defensive agendas coming up. HB is going to get 1. Jinteki already has 2.
It smells to me like factions are going to be getting defensive 5-3s. I think the design team has learnt its lesson on making 5-3s playable. You've got to make them defensive in some way. Obviously, Jinteki's already got their future perfect. I look forward to see what Weyland is going to get. I hope it's not just a meat damage Obakata, but we'll see.
Yep, that'll be interesting to see.
Jumping back on NAPD, I'll miss it, and we'll probably all miss it for one extra reason, namely that look on the runner's face when he you know exactly where I'm building to. That look. They find it, they look happy, and suddenly the whole face, everything, that look of deflatedness when they notice the free credits. Yeah,
the Netrunner.
We'll miss that.
The Netrunner's card that relates to that face will probably have to rotate out as well. Yeah, okay, so NAPD is going, sad face, but Falsely is coming back in. I think Falsely has a very interesting niche, and I'm happy to see it come back.
I am happy and sad about this. Happy because it means that Jemison gets one more cool agenda that it can utilize. I think having agendas that allow you to forfeit, especially losing posted bounty, is cool, and it's an important design space to make Jemison, you give Jemison more options. I hated that stupid false lead, hard-hitting combo, and the fact that that still exists, to me, is, I think that that's pretty bad.
Yep. Okay, so any other neutral cards that anyone wants to talk about?
Why is Hunter in the core set? Okay. So, from a design perspective, cool, fine. I desperately hope they have made the art on this card better. That card had the most perplexing art of all the core set cards. It was an Illuminati eye, but not an Illuminati eye. I mean, ugh. I hope that the art in this one has been massively improved.
Yeah, speaking of new art, a lot of the cards are going to get new art. That is something I'm really hyped up about.
Yeah, me too. I love the new Ash art. Like, that alone will make me spend money on a revised core, I think. I really like it.
For me, it's the new Chaos Theory. Oh, so good.
I love
TJ. Yeah. It's just awesome. And Dinosaurus with an eye patch. Oh, okay.
I'm going to rave all about that in our next video. Yeah, Dinosaurus and Chaos Theories. That's amazing. But yeah, it's a very good way to get all players to buy the new core set, even though these cards are legal.
And if we're just talking about neutral cards that rotate generally, as opposed to core set ones, I think losing restructure is going to be a big deal, but I think everyone knew that was coming, and this is why IPO has been printed. It's basically restructure 2 as a terminal. Losing subliminal messaging is going to be sad for me, because I think it's a well-designed card. I think it's, it has been used in degenerate Jeeves nonsense and lots of other things, but the idea of having a card that bounces back to your hand every time the runner refuses to make a run on their turn is great, because it incentivizes the runner to run, it rewards you for stopping them from doing it, and it's got a nice little trickle on it and an effect which you haven't seen in any other card. I think it's a real shame that Subliminal is going.
Thank you. Exactly the card I wanted to mention as well. It would have made a fine teaching tool in a new core, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely could have been. Well, so I guess we've spent long enough talking about cards. So yeah, thank you everyone. Oh, wait.
Ben, you almost missed the big one. The discussion we need to have about rotation and this new core set.
Is it our favorite toy maker?
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Okay. So, breaking news: Jackson Howard is rotating. Has anyone here played with a Corp deck without Jackson Howard?
I have.
I have. Yeah, it sucks. It's the worst.
Okay, I guess I'm the only one because I've played with a Jackson Howard my entire life. I don't know what to make of this.
It's horrendous, Ben. Trust me. Like, it's so bad.
Yeah. He was designed specifically because it was an issue in Core Set Netrunner where Corps were losing just to Bad Flood. And they were like, okay, well, let's design this nice, useful thing which lets you draw through your flood, cycle those agendas back into your deck, and control your hand so you don't feel like you're just getting beaten by variants. And it was so good at doing that it became a staple. And then people realized that it had additional kind of higher level uses as a play tool. The recursion on it never felt particularly oppressive because they weren't going back into your hand. It was just going back into your deck. It encouraged lines of play which were unique to the existence of Jackson Howard. And I think losing it is like ripping pages and pages out of the Learn to Play Netrunner Well guide.
Yeah. To me...
Losing this card
go ahead.
is, for me, the single biggest reason why I'm worried about Corp play in the competitive meta going forward, and indeed in all forms of the game going forward. It seems to me like the ability to filter your hand in terms of the replacement cards we've got is near non-existent. I've tried all of the other options that we've been given. The, what do they call it? Not anonymous tip. The
Special report.
Special report. I've tried preemptive. I've tried one power. They're like, to say that they're less efficient would be just an unbelievable overstatement. I mean, they don't do the job that they need to do to fix that problem in the game. And this card exists because, as Rich pointed out, this was a problem in the game. The fact that you've got a core set that is designed specifically to fix problems in the game that doesn't include this card is, to me, I'm not surprised given Damon's opinion on this card. Damon, you're wrong. You are just wrong about the need for this card in the game. It's necessary, it's important, and frankly, it should be in the core set in place of Anonymous Tip.
To be fair, Mr. Box actually has the same opinion, for the record. I think he thinks that Jackson is not required for the game. But yeah,
Box, you are also wrong.
Yeah, Rich?
The only thing I would do so I think part of the reason people dislike Jackson Howard is that because he's such a necessary component of deck building, he's not only ubiquitous, but he's actually an influence tax on every non-NBN ID. I mean, there are obvious ways that you can fix that in terms of, hey, here's a neutral version of Jackson Howard. Why we can't see something like that unless that's going to come up in this next cycle, but I have my severe doubts that we're ever going to see Jackson Howard in the kind of incarnation that he is at the moment.
Yeah, to me, Jackson Howard is not a card. It's a rules patch. There's a fundamental problem with agenda flood and card filtering because when you compare the Corp to the runner side, the Corp side's draw is a lot worse than runner draw, and the Corp side has worse tutors. You can't tutor for your ice in the same way that runners can tutor for the icebreakers efficiently. So Jackson helps you do that and so much more. It's not just a crutch. I think it is something that really helps even the Corp and runner win ratio and provides a more consistent experience, which is especially important for competitive players. And
I think it's worth pointing out that this is recursion done right. I mean, we've heard endless complaints about Friends in High Places over the last little while because of the fact that it doesn't remove itself from the game. This is also a design problem that the designers realized with Deja Vu. It's why they've taken that card out of the game. So the one card that does recursion by removing itself from the game doesn't make it back into the core set. What?
Yeah.
I just.
And for those of you who haven't tried the card before, no, preemptive action is nowhere near
Not
the
the same.
Not even close.
It's because the thing is, what allowed you to manage the hand was not hiding agendas and archives. That was never the point of Jackson. It was the fact that you could overdraw to filter your hand. And I mean, that had its own risks, right? You've had games, I'm sure, all of you, where you overdrew into more agendas than you could handle. And that was also a problem. But Jackson at least gave you the possibility of having an out in those games and allowed you to play properly. I think Damon's response as you deal with agenda flood by just sticking agendas on the table is just it fundamentally doesn't understand how Netrunner is played at anything higher than the kitchen table level, where runners actually will go and check things because you have to check things.
Yeah.
And
the thing with Jackson, like when we're talking about getting flooded, I've had games where I have mulliganed into 4 agendas, and my immediate response is, okay, I need to draw into a Jackson. Like, you're with that option not available to you, you are just going to sit there, draw 1 card a turn, and die a very slow and unfun death when your opponent finds a legwork and takes 7 points off you. Like, it not only punishes you for by removing the option to filter your deck later on in the game, but it gives you no option when you start with a bad hand and you've got no way to fix it.
Yeah.
I think it's also additionally worth pointing out that you don't really have... HQ is not a safe place at the moment, given the way in which they've changed the nature of multi-access. HQ interface remains at the card pool. Legwork remains at the card pool.
Yeah.
And the Gauntlet remains at the card pool and is now a much more viable criminal option given the lack of Desperado.
Yes.
All of those cards make HQ really, really, really unsafe. You want to be able to put agendas back into R&D, and you don't want them sitting in archives, because that's part of the problem with playing Glacier strategies. You don't want to have to dedicate ice any more than you need to archives. And, the Temujin contract has already fundamentally changed the way in which Corps think about defending archives. To add this additional thing where we also now need to protect archives further in order to prevent ourselves from just straight up losing to Flood is just nonsense, I think.
Also, one very important point that most people forget about Jackson Howard is that it's actually a safety valve for printing mill cards as well. To bring out a point from Quagos from chat, Quagos said that Quagos said that like Clan Vengeance, Venedis Armory, things like that, those cards need to go. But in my opinion, it's not those cards that need to go. It's that Jackson needs to stay, because Jackson helps you protect against cards like Fear the Masses as well. That's another card that becomes a lot scarier when not every Corp has an easy means of recursion in their deck. So, Jackson opens up a lot of design space and makes Corps level with the runner. I don't think a replacement is coming soon, and that really worries me as much as it does you. Alright, so that's basically going to wrap up this video. So it's been nearly 2 hours, but I think we have very fruitful dialogue on the Corp side of Core 2.0. Join us again for next time where we discuss the runner side. Until then, it's thanks from me and goodbye from Tris.
Cheers guys, thanks for listening.
Goodbye from Rich.
Goodbye, thank you Ben, thank you everyone. And
goodbye from Yakuza.
Goodbye. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Yep, indeed. Thank you, everyone, for tuning. We have 88 viewers. That's amazing. In the meantime, thanks for watching. And as always, happy net running. Goodbye.